Okay, we're we're recording because we're not live because it's Thanksgiving, but you're here. How's it going, sir?
It's going well. How are you? How's your
Uh,
future Thanksgiving?
yeah, happy future Thanksgiving to all those listeners out there, covering our grounds today, but premiering for you all for those that aren't celebrating Thanksgiving, or at least wanting to ease off all the wonderful food and crazy shopping if that you've done uh, for Black Friday and whatnot. So, yeah, it's. I hope it's been a really interesting set of weeks between the time we're recording this and the time it drops. It's We're in a weird
Definitely,
space, right?
yeah, definitely a couple of things going to happen from recording to Thanksgiving. We'll know a few more things that we didn't know today.
Exactly. Yeah. So I don't even know if I'm gonna. I mean, I'm gonna try to be in the chat, listening and interacting with people during this show if I'm not pulled away to do anything else. So there's that. But yeah, we've got a really different type of script for this week. So yeah, let's get into it right away. Not waste any more time for this 48th episode of the show. Uh, so here we go. Welcome to Scripts on Saturdays, the only screenplay review show on the interwebs, discussing scripts both professional and amateur, circulating around Hollywood, giving you, the TV and movie-going audience, a behind-the-scenes and inside track on what writers are pushing and what producers are buying. I am your host, the Script Doctor, and joining me this week is Jake of 52 Movies a Year. So glad to have you back. So glad that you're here to do this conversation with me, and also for this type of script because this is definitely very different from what we've read so far this year.
Yes, it has. It it is the first that I can think of, and definitely a different script.
Yeah, and it's got a throwback to some older style writing. But before we get into that real quick, Jake, glad to have you back. How are you doing so far? I guess Halloween is just around the corner by the time we're recording this, so
Yeah.
got to get ready for kids, grandkids, trick or treat, and all that type of stuff.
Yep. Yep. It'll be. We've got good weather. We just had a bad snap, but I'm excited to have trick or treat out of the way, move on. I love Thanksgiving. That's my favorite holiday. Halloween I like too, especially having the grandkids come around and the kids.
hmm
Uh, but yeah, it should be a fun, good, good year this year.
Yeah, here's hoping to a strong end on the year, especially. So actually, kind of dovetails a little bit into the theme of this script here about futures. So we've read this week a screenplay by Luke Piotrowski called Blasphemous. It placed 49th on the 2023 blacklist with 9 votes. And the logline is as such: an inexperienced priest and a charismatic possessed woman from a dark and dangerous, form a dark and dangerous bond while on the run from sinister forces within the Catholic Church. Jake, could you share with us the synopsis for this script, Blasphemous?
Yes. When two men, Villers and Kerrigan, take a mysterious woman bound in a sheet from a backwoods community, they find themselves on a harrowing journey into the heart of darkness. Kerrigan, a priest struggling with his faith, is tasked with delivering the woman to safety. But something sinister lurks beneath the surface. Haunted by strange voices, shadowy figures, and a growing sense of dread, Kerrigan must confront the demons of his past while Villers steers them towards an uncertain fate. Will faith be enough to save them, all or are they all destined to be lost?
So I have to say, I'm glad we're doing this on Thanksgiving and not on Christmas, given the subject matter.
Yep.
So this one, this was an interesting read from this writer. I don't know much about him. Sadly, I haven't had a whole lot of time to research who this gentleman is. or what he's done in the past, but it seems like he's had a couple of things under his belt for a while now here. And it all seems to sort of orbit the horror genre. And this, I would say, this script is definitely a psychological horror film. What was your take on it, Jake?
Yeah, yeah, I would say that as well. We talked just before the show, and you said, shows that reminded you of an Exorcist and stuff like that, and I hadn't seen them, but yeah, it definitely is that psychological thriller. You get uh, into the minds of Kerrigan and Villers a little bit as their actions are explored, and I thought that part was very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, this has
I
got a
didn't take a whole lot to pull you in to
yeah.
other things.
It has a very fun dynamic between Villers and Kerrigan because Villers he's like in his 50s. He's the older priest, and he's very determined, and he's very big on self-sacrifice for following what he interprets as God's will. Kerrigan has a lot of doubt in things around him, but not so much in his actual faith. He's got a strong moral compass, which I think
Yeah.
was very relevant right in the beginning because you have this very eerie setup where they go inside a silo, and then they see what is obviously a woman wrapped in like a bed sheet with a little bit of blood seeping through the face. But when more light kind of comes into this silo, like it's like a grain silo, you see all these bodies hanging upside down, and it's quite a shocking sight. And I wanted to ask this of you, Jake. Do you think that was real, or was it part of the hallucinations that seems to be emitted from this woman that's been shrouded?
So, yeah, on that one, particularly the first time, I thought it was real.
Yeah.
But that's because they had done a really good job of setting up. They were going to an area where everyone behaved the same way, and you got a really strong sense that here you got they've got a radio preacher going on. You've got the whole aesthetic of people who don't trust outsiders.
Mm-hmm.
Something going on here. She being sacrificed. What's going on? And when he first saw that and they described that, I took it as legitimate. But after reading it again, I was like, okay, that's the first hallucination or mind trick. But I liked that being that vague
That we don't know for certain. Yeah.
because you can go, oh, okay, is that what I saw? Or did I even see what I thought I saw? Was there something I saw, or was that all shadow? And I thought that was great because the others right down the road, further down the script, they're
Mm-hmm.
cut and dry. Oh, okay, I know.
Yeah, they're less ambiguous, but I liked that mystery because that basically forced me to kind of lean in closer to the screen while reading the script because I'm like, whoa, what is this happening here?
Yeah, yeah. From that moment on, it's all right. Am I dealing with monsters? Am I dealing with supernatural? What am I dealing with? Yeah, that moment that did that for me at that moment too.
And I liked how the writer kind of built up this context where it's like this isolated village, and it's got its own rumors and stories that the outside world has about it. You don't know if it's like Amish or if it's just kind of its own type of Jamestown or whatever it is. We don't know exactly the finer details because the writer does a great job of actually keeping the character count very, very low. It's primarily 3 characters. And the woman who is in this shroud is named Paula Jean, but Villers doesn't want to acknowledge her name, doesn't want to say anything about her, saying that they've got to get her to this one location in a handful of hours so that they can, save this woman. They keep on using the terms like they got to save her, we have to save her, we're doing to save her. And when Kerrigan tries to sort of figure out a little bit more about how they are going to save this person and who this person is they're saving, Villers keeps knocking him down and blocking his questions because Kerrigan, we find out after they start moving this individual from the silo to essentially like a U-Haul, finds out that he was sent here by the church just recently to help with this transfer, and
Yes.
um, and we don't know which church it is yet because they haven't really said anything uh, that gives that exactly away. But as you guys have heard in the synopsis and the log line, it is a Catholic church, or at least some sort of branch of, or another type of, you know, section of the church that overlaps or parallels with the Catholic Church. So it's really cool because we have no clue for a number of pages exactly what is going on with these two characters and what is going on with this woman who she starts to speak and Villers keeps on trying to shut her up, and we learned that her name is Paula Jean, and she uses her very youthful, innocent voice to try and appeal to the humanity in Villers and Kerrigan to let her go. But Villers is adamant, nope, we're not doing this. We handcuff her inside and to the U-Haul, and we get this really disturbing scene where she manages to like get her hand out from underneath the sheet, and she's like working her way on the screws that's holding the handcuffs to the interior of the U-Haul, and she's like chewing away. The screw is like chewing away the thumb and part of the nail. I'm like, ooh, that's making me squirm.
Yeah. Yeah, that did. Great, it give you a great visual, but it would you get that exact reaction.
And so I wanted to get your thoughts because when I was seeing like Villers, I'm like, okay, here's a stern, battle hardened type of guy. If he is part of the like a legitimate church and not some sort of cult religion type of thing, he's kind of seen a lot, and he's trying to educate Kerrigan, who's still young enough to still be easily manipulated. But what did you find interesting about their dynamic?
I really liked their dynamic, especially at the beginning, because you got I guess I wouldn't say mentor, but experienced. Villers is experienced.
Mm-hmm.
Kerrigan obviously green and new enough, but not necessarily like unqualified, not necessarily scared, but just rightfully like, do I belong here? Should I be here in this moment? And you could clearly see that Villers, he's probably a little too desensitized, and Kerrigan's a little undersensitized. And together, you're going, okay, they're either going to balance each other out or they're going to clash, was my thoughts.
Right.
And one thing I really liked is, uh, up until, well, you really don't know the day other until you don't, it could be any year.
Yep.
It could be any town, almost any country other than, the language being spoke. And I don't know if that was intentional, but it was something I was thinking about while I was reading is where are we at? What time frame? What decade? Because that would matter in the way they would behave. Um, or actually it would more matter for me of how I would think they would behave. So um, that just there was just this mystery around everyone, but what you did learn about them clearly defined what you needed to know to kind of dictate their actions.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's definitely orbiting the modern era because they still have cell phones, they still do like, pins and sharing
Oh
locations
yeah,
and stuff. But like
but up
it's
until
not
you saw that pin, you didn't
tightened.
know. That was
Oh,
the first time a cell phone was brought up.
oh yeah, like that's like 30,
And
40 pages into the script at that point. Right now,
yeah,
it's just old beat up cars, rentals, and radio. So
and
you have
radio.
this wilderness to it.
The music being played, Belinda Carlisle.
Oh
That
yeah,
could have
80s stuff.
been that could have been modern. So it could have been set in the 80s, could have been
Hmm.
90s. And I just remember thinking that while I was reading it, going, I wonder if this is a good thing or a bad thing that I don't know what year it is, what decade we're in. Or if that was intentional, or if it was I was the only one thinking it, up until the cell phone.
Hmm.
I was like, okay, that brought me right out, and I go, okay, I know where I'm at. That's okay. None of this is bad. That's not a bad thing. And the father, the The priests and they may not, be looking at their phone every 5 minutes.
I mean, given the
And
tasks they
then,
have, there's no reason for them to even bother with technology at this point. It's a courier job, right?
yeah.
They Villers knows exactly where he's going. Kerrigan is there for support. Paula Jean is messing with them so much so that we get our second, I think maybe our second hallucination with this kid named Eddie, which is supposed to be Ed as a child. Like he's through like a third party perspective is seeing something he did as a kid, and it's getting or it gets to Kerrigan to the point where Villers has to like kind of remind him to push it out. It's not real. It's a manipulation. It's a hallucination, and I was kind of there for it because this was confirmation of the supernatural at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, Villers isn't affected by it, and maybe she's targeting it towards Kerrigan because he's inexperienced, or maybe he's more susceptible. But I like how only one was experiencing it.
Yeah, it
You
was
know that?
basically like a divide and conquer type of thing, where you
Yeah.
once you realize like when Villers is basically, and it's not like straightforward like on the nose dialogue. It's a little subtle, but it's also orbiting exactly what it's supposed to do, which is saying just block it out, push it out, acknowledge that it's not real. It's just her messing with you, and it's only temporary. And
So
yeah, go ahead.
so so what did you think about what was revealed? It wasn't anything that really mattered to the story in the moment, but where it's Eddie's, it's implying it's Eddie's past.
Yeah.
Uh, as, that's what do you think? Is that okay? Do you just bring that in for a quick reference, just to it's more established something traumatic happened,
Hmm.
um, but you don't need to know. I felt like, okay, it brought me in and went, okay, what happened? But I don't need to know what happened, because the whole point of having it was just to put fear, doubt, maybe bring him back to his childhood, reinforce his
Vulnerability. Yeah.
insecurity and vulnerability. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I interpreted it. The other part too is that we get a little bit of payoff of what that means later on in the diner. But
Oh, that's true. That's true.
and I think that's just how it worked out well. Like it was well structured in that regard, because it seems like this random thing, but it also kind of makes. I mean, if you want to visualize this as if you're watching it as a film as opposed to just reading it on the page, it basically this hallucination, which is mostly auditorial, kind of pairs up with were the bodies we saw in the grain silo, were those real or were those also a hallucination? And the hallucinations are very vivid, like you kind of smell and taste and feel, and these hallucinations around you. There's sounds that are so subtle and so natural that it makes a very convincing illusion, all with these hallucinations. So whether it's there or not, it's really it really kind of gets under your skin, and I really appreciated that angle for it, because that's kind of what you want to do with these types of supernatural stories is you want to have your antagonist force your protagonist to doubt what is the reality of their own story,
Yeah.
and it's a really good challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine that's really hard because I mean, when you're in the moment and
Hmm.
you're scared, not even watching something, but like you're just in the dark and you thought you heard something, and that thing of panic hits, it just feels so real. But try to describe it to someone later, and even as you're saying it, you're just like, oh, that's silly.
Yeah.
But to be able to pull that off while reading writing, I felt it in that moment. So I was like, wow, I'm really hooked at this. I'm really hooked. I realized that this guy he's visual. He's really shook.
Hmm.
And I thought I did it. Some things were a little bit long and maybe a little bit jerky, but in those moments that grabbed me, it grabbed me pretty hard.
Well, like speaking of one heck of a jerky moment, there's one that comes in really quick, like just after the 10 pages, where they've got Paula Jean in the back of the truck. They're in the front cab. We just got over Eddie's hallucination. They're listening to the radio, and they're driving, and then they hit something. We don't know what it is, but like Villers is cursing, and of course Kerrigan is telling like, "No, Father Villers," language.
I like that. Yeah.
And then Villers is like, "God will forgive me for this situation."
You can curse when it calls for it.
Exactly, you can curse when it calls for it, and so they get knocked off the road to the point where I think they don't necessarily flip over, but they're definitely on the side, like their wheels are upturned, and you find out they hit a bull that was in the middle of the road.
Yeah.
And
you'd think you'd see it.
You think you see, well, I mean, they're driving like very late in the night. I don't even think it's I don't see. I don't know exactly what time of day it is because I think it's like either late evening or like way after midnight because, and I only say that I'm not 100% sure because there's another character that comes in that says they have to go pick up their kids. And I'm like, well, who has to pick up their kids if this is like, 2 a.m. in the morning? Shouldn't the kids be at home in bed? But
yeah, you'd be better off saying something else. But I guess, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so I'm not 100% sure. And I guess that's a subtle, negative for the script. But I liked how the way it was written is that it's supposed to be as shocking and confusing as the characters are. So they hit something. They have no idea what's going on. They topple over. They manage to crawl their way out of the cab. Kerrigan wants to go check on Paula Jean, make sure she's okay. Villers doesn't care. He's just like, don't do anything. We'll be fine here. This is where we got our first cell phone scene where Villers says, okay, I'm going to call our people. They'll come by here and help us out. And Kerrigan is like, well, what if someone slows down? And Villers like, not on this road. Nobody ever slows down. So Villers kind of goes to look for a signal because they're in a dead zone. And Kerrigan is there to just watch over. And while he's there, he gets another hallucination that causes him to go into the road, and then he nearly gets hit by a car that ends up stopping. And it's, this nice guy who's like, hey, you okay, man? What happened? Are you hurt? Do you need help? I've got a winch. And this is great screenwriting. This is never make anything easier for your main characters. Now, this guy who has no idea what's going on, and Kerrigan is like, he can't let this guy know that there's a woman in the back of his car or the back of his truck because he's going to get the wrong idea. He doesn't know what they're trying to do or what they're planning to do. And even though it's implied heavily that Kerrigan is trying to save this woman, the optics of it says a completely different story, right?
Yeah, you would have, put yourself in the other driver's shoes. There's a guy out in the road you nearly hit.
Right.
And then, anything he finds is not going to be, oh, well, I'll see you, good luck.
Kerrigan gets really close saying like, no, we're good. I got a guy with a tow. He's like, you sure? It's no trouble. He's like, nope. Thank you, sir. It's very kindly of you. And he's about to go. And then Paula Jean makes enough noise that it gets the driver's attention. And so much so that he
knew it in that moment. Like, oh.
Kerrigan is worried, and he's like, no, it's okay. We're trying to save her. He's like, you're a human trafficker, and it's going back and forth. And the driver's getting so upset, he grabs his shotgun. And, take it away, Jake. This was a fun scene for me. How did you like it?
I really liked this scene, actually, because this is where I pictured, if this was made, I could picture this being the trailer for the movie.
Right.
The wreck.
The driver coming out and inquiring.
Driver coming out, or even just the because they implied, did she do this? Did she did she something they're so on edge anyway. They're like, did she make this happen? Did she make the bolt? That was implied, and then if you showed what they showed her out in the road holding the bull's head, in the trailer, and then lights, it disappears in lights and the guy's walking towards it, that would hook anybody, the way I see it.
Yeah, because
you're like, I don't know what this is, but I'm gonna go see it because I want to know why that almost happened.
I want to know why that's almost happened. I want to know, like, here's the other part too. This is the type of script that you have to frame it as this woman is in danger. There's these two people that say they're going to help her, but that's put in doubt because you have the third party of the drivers like, wait a minute, this doesn't look like you're helping somebody. And
Yeah,
this
and she
is,
comes out all, oh, help me, help me.
yeah.
I mean, what would you do? You would do exactly what that driver did.
Yes. I mean, if you're a decent human being, you definitely want to investigate enough to know what is going on. And there's two ways about it. Number one, you could go all superhero and try and rescue the person. Number two, you could call the authorities and just follow them from a distance until
Yeah,
the
they're not
authorities
going
get
any.
support. And then you have that extra party out there where, okay, if you're wrong, worst case scenario, it's an inconvenience. But if you're right, I mean, you saved a person's life by not compromising them further with regards to, oh crap, we got found. Well, we're just going to destroy all the evidence, and because what we have here in the script, which I like this direction a lot, is the driver. He pulls out his shotgun. He's ready to collect some bodies to save this woman, and this is where we get the confirmation that Kerrigan is a priest and he's a Catholic priest. And of course, the driver's like, "Well, you're not dressed like a priest." He's like, "Well, we don't always wear the collars." Like it's a little comic bit there, but works here because these guys they're dressed in civilian clothes, kind of. I'm thinking like denim shirts or plaid shirts, casual wear that will allow them to blend into like a farming community of that
Yeah,
type.
maybe driving a blacked out SUV or something, but not a U-Haul truck. There's definitely a look, and they at this point do not have any of that look behind them.
Exactly, and the driver, we get. I like how they make him consistently a good person because
Yeah,
when he is concerned for Paula Jean and he's not sure about Kerrigan, he shoots one warning shot in the air, and basically he's like, "Listen, just back away and let me help this woman." And he doesn't try to kill Kerrigan off the bat. He's just like, "I still don't know, but what I do know is that sounds wrong and that needs to be fixed." And when he
yeah,
does, shoot that blast into the air, that of course gets the attention of Villers, and then he goes back to cursing again, and hanging up on the phone, and then running after the sound to see what's going on, and we get into a weird squabble where Villers manages to pull out a revolver, I think.
yeah. He had a revolver in the glove compartment,
Yep.
I believe, and I guess it's lucky it's still there after not rolling, but kind of sliding off the road can get to it. But yeah, that part that didn't flow as well as I thought everything else was flowing,
Mm-hmm.
but it obviously did detract enough from it. But you
But
know,
we also find out that in the rifle, it's birdshot. It's not buckshot, so it's dangerous rounds, and it could be lethal at very close range, but not in the way the driver is shooting. But he does
oh
manage to like get Villers in the side, which I was like,
yes,
holy crap.
and I thought that would be another great scene for the trailer because you see a guy get shot, you're going, okay, this guy, that's what the show's about. This guy gets, his buddy dies. But then it would be one of those things where it didn't have to follow through because you find out it was birdshot.
Hmm.
But it would be enough of a visual to hook you and make you think that, well, yeah, because at that moment I thought, oh, well, I guess Kerrigan's on his own. I don't know how he's getting out of this.
And that's a great question to ask because you want to see how it works out. And we get this skirmish where Villers when Kerrigan reluctantly opens the back of the truck to show Paula Jean still covered completely in the white sheet, and she's just standing there normally, which should be very creepy of a shot. I at least that's how I envisioned it.
Yeah, she was calm, just like, okay,
And
let's see how this
and
goes.
and the driver's there going like, this is crazy. And then all of a sudden Villers comes up behind him with a rock in his hand, just smacks it across the driver's face. And I'm like, oh my,
Yeah.
what the heck? Father Villers, you've got some demons inside of you at this point. And this is where they get into that scuffle, and then there's a blind fire. Kerrigan gets winged in like the stomach and chest. He's not quite. I mean, he's got some not fully shot, but enough that it's not a good sign. That's where he manages to recover, and grab the revolver. And now we've got this kind of standoff between Villers, the driver, and then Kerrigan, who, in all this chaos, realizes that Paula Jean has managed to escape. She's running into the woods. And Villers is like, okay, you go after her. I will cover you. And then you get her and bring her back here so that we can get her to where she's got to go. And, of course, Kerrigan, every time he tries to inch out, the driver shoots at him. So Villers squeezes off a round of himself. That gives him cover. He gets into the woods. And we're kind of off into like the first foot chase of this story. And what's pretty crazy is, like, with Villers no longer having Kerrigan over his shoulder, we kind of get a new perspective on what Villers is doing. And I think, Jake, you'd be the best one to share this because you probably had the biggest reaction to this revelation here.
Oh, with the
between Villers and the driver, like they have this, like they're trading shots, and
and I liked how he set it up to, do you trust me?
Mm-hmm.
And you take off running, and he actually exposes the driver to get him. I was shocked because I was like, okay, well, am I supposed to root for him? I mean, you would think there would be a better way. Even if your life's in danger, you're kind of going, okay, you still can't kill somebody.
Mm-hmm.
You're a priest, you're a father, there's got to be something. So and maybe his cold nature was, is he really the bad guy?
Yeah.
And then when he's actually now Kerrigan's going after the girl. I mean, at that point, I was almost thinking, is he going to just escape? He's clearly shocked because Villers shot the driver.
Yeah.
But he's still staying on task. And I thought, at that moment, I was really wanting him to go, okay, I'm going to leave. Now it's not about her. It's about him trying to escape from Villers, or, is there a justified reason for this?
Exactly. Like we do find out a little bit later that from Villers' perspective, there is a reason. I don't think he's justified in doing so. And this goes into something that's actually quite relevant, not like specific to this date, but just in regards to like how much a person's faith can be used to justify certain atrocities. Like, there's a reason the Spanish Inquisition is brought up several times as basically misguided interpretation of faith by controlling and robbing people of their own agency to follow their beliefs as opposed to their original ones.
I'm doing this because I love you and I'm saving you.
Yes. It's like, but why are you stringing me up and telling me I have to repent against the God that in my traditions? Is because we love you. It's just it's double speak.
The only way to save you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And I mean, and in this case, like if you wanted to make this, oh, these are two heroes and this driver reacted poorly, and he's now suffering and he's been shot. Villers would be the guy who's like, I'm going to tend to your wounds. I'm going to call the ambulance. We're going to make sure you're okay, my son, and all that type of stuff. But Villers doesn't do that. Instead, he basically says, okay, we're going to pray. And he takes his hand, he prays. And then as Kerrigan is searching frantically in the woods for Paula, you hear a gunshot. And it's not a shotgun shot. It's a revolver shot.
And I like that. Normally, I don't like the things that are happening off screen.
Mm-hmm.
But when whoa, did he just finish him off? That's what you think, because that's what Kerrigan would think.
Yeah, and
whether you're watching it or reading it,
and we're getting it through basically Kerrigan's point of view, and the other part too is because they did that. They did it off screen, but they also took advantage of it. They didn't need you to see it. Like the gunshot would do enough, and it's not like a random thing where we're just wandering through the woods. All of a sudden, there's a gunshot. What was that? We don't know. And then 3-4 pages or 5 minutes later, you find out what that actually is. This one was more set up, payoff from a different part. but also nailing the fact that it's about Kerrigan's reaction to hearing that, and
Yeah.
and it's supposed to shake him. And as he hears that, he then finds the discarded bed sheet and realizes that, oh, Paula Jean, she's I mean, she's not naked, but she's out there.
Well, I
Um,
definitely have the trail, and now his motive has to change
right.
if he's going to stay consistent at all. He Because put yourself in that moment, you'd be going, well, is there any chance that this guy's not going to finish him off? And so in my mind, I'm going, okay, that shot.
Mm-hmm.
Did the driver somehow get the gun and now Villar's in trouble? But no, it goes straight to the discarded sheet. So if he's staying true to his character, he's going to go find Paula Jean regardless of what's going on.
Exactly, and
And
we
they pulled us right there with it.
and what's even better is that we get something a little different, because if I'm trying to pay close attention. I'm even like skimming back through the script, but I don't think we actually see Paula Jean take off the bed sheet. So all we know is that the bed sheet is discarded, and then we cut to a gas station mini mart, and that's when Paula Jean enters, and she shuffles in through the automatic doors. But if you're watching this visually, for the first few seconds, you probably wouldn't realize or put together that that is the person that was under the sheet until she starts. You get the clink clink sounds of the handcuffs that are chained to her ankles as she's walking through. So like I could see a director having fun with this, where it's like, okay, we're at a gas station mini mart, it's at night, junkie walks in to do something, and then you get that extra little notation of, oh wait, this is who is under the sheet.
Yeah, I like that. I definitely like that because you're still wondering.
Oh, exactly, and this is where we get introduced to technically our fourth named character, and that is the attendant named Bethany. She doesn't have an age. We don't know how old she is, but Paula Jean is messing with her a lot. First, she's like, she's drinking drinks out of the fridge. She's cutting open packages, eating stuff there.
She's eating. She's making a
mess.
Moans of how pleasureful eating and indulgence, I guess.
Oh, absolutely. And Bethany, being the good employee managing this place at the time, is saying, well, like, are you going to be paying for this? And of course, Paula Jean has no clue. Like, she's like, maybe, just messing with her. And it just goes back and forth to the point where, like, Paula Jean is just now intimidating the heck out of Bethany. And this is a good chunk of the script. I think maybe about 10 pages or so. But it's done in a very clever and heavy tension way, because Paula Jean, she's well aware that her appearance is not great, her behavior is not great, but she basically points to the sign that says no shoes, no shirt, no service, and she's like, oh, because I'm not wearing any shoes, you asking me to leave. I get you. And
yeah, I like that little bit.
And of course, Bethany says, no, you're stealing. And then it gets into this little philosophical thing. It's like, well, I'm not stealing from you, Bethany. I'm stealing, I guess, from Chevron. And Bethany's like, it's still not right. And of course, Paula Jean, this is where we realize we get a little bit more into like Villar's perspective, because now Paula Jean is really kind of messing with Bethany. So much so that she ends up getting like, an X-Acto knife. And challenging Paula Jean's like, oh, do you have a gun? And Bethany's like, well, no, the previous guy that worked here, he took it with him, so we got nothing.
I like that because as the line was that she looked over, it implied that Paula Jean read her mind.
Yeah.
Or she just read the situation. It could be either way.
That's right, because there's nothing has been we haven't been committed to what it is yet. It's all like, is this just a mentally unstable person that maybe was going to go to a hospital, or is it actually something more sinister?
And Bethany is definitely not even a knock on her as a character. She's not in control.
Right.
She's she's quickly losing any, she's I'm sure she's, you would experience a lot of crazy people, and some people you're like, I'll just leave them alone. Call the cops, they'll deal with them. If you leave them alone, they'll just kind of mind themselves. But Paula Jean is messing with her. She's like, "Do you know where I'm from? Compound." It's established that everyone knows.
That
This
compound. Yeah.
this compound area, and she's like, "Oh, we don't have food like that." And Bethany goes, at the compound," and Paula Jean kind of winks at her and points the knife at her, like, "Got me."
Yep.
And I like that line because it was, we're realizing with Bethany, we're realizing what Bethany's realizing. This isn't just a crazy person,
Yeah, there's something deeper going on here.
and
And
and she's, maybe she's aware she's being messed with in her mind and being forced to feel a little more fear and doubt.
yeah, I think so as well, because it's like the biggest fear for working late night alone in a convenience store or gas station is there's always going to be at least one nut job that comes in and ruins your night.
Yeah,
It just comes with the territory. And this case here is Paula Jean, but Bethany's doing kind of everything that you'd expect a person in a position to do. So like, okay, listen, I get it, you're crazy or whatever. Just take what you want and get out. And Paula Jean's like, no, I think I'm going to lock the door. And I'm going to ask you to turn off the open sign, but not just the open sign. I want you to turn off all the lights in the gas station. And
and I'm
Bethany's
doing
just
it
begging her
to
not
protect
to.
you because I don't. There's bad people coming after me, and I want to protect you. You don't believe her, but you also go, you want to believe her.
Right, that's right. She frames it in such a way. She's like, there's some bad men that are after me, and I'm in danger, and I don't want that to hurt you. The funny part is, like, she's like, it's not my husband or my family, it's these other people. So she's really kind of making a very convincing argument that if you didn't know what we have learned so far up to this point, you'd be able to say, okay, there's a little bit of empathy that you could play with that.
Yeah,
But even then, um, Paula Jean just kind of goes crazy talking about like, oh, if you get contraband, they punish you. If you go to the washroom in a certain way, they start punishing you. Like everything is about punishing you. And they talk, and she's also explained the hypocrisy of the rules of this compound. And in some cases, I think they're also making a commentary on certain aspects of faith. And
yeah,
it's all doing that just to kind of get under Bethany's skin, but at the same time also to appeal to her as well. And it's really like it's clever dialogue, and it does move the scene quite well. And right as we get, right as we see that Bethany is kind of warming up a little bit to her, that's where Paul's like, "Oh, it looks like I stepped on some glass," and she pulls out the shard of glass and says, "Do you happen to have like a bandage or something for this?" And Bethany's like, "Yeah, you can have a bandage." She's like, "Great. Now can you turn the lights off and stuff?" and that's the end of the scene. It's like really, like it's kind of chilling, or at least for me, I thought it was kind of chilling because you had this character with very different changing goals, but when you kind of cut through the various different things that Paula Jean's asking for, like for food, for locking the door, turning off the lights and everything, it's really her goal is just to control this situation and make it her domicile for this next period of time. And the only
yeah,
obstacle to that is Bethany because she's technically in charge of the location.
yeah. I liked it because if you read it in one perspective, Paula Jean's just doing it for herself.
Mm-hmm.
But in every situation, she points out how there's a hint that, oh, this is how it helps you,
Yeah.
or enough of a relatable, like, it's just, it's deceitful. And that's exactly what you'd be expecting from what you find out about the characters, just the deceit,
The
you're happy, I want to make you
manipulation.
sad.
Yeah.
You're
The
sad, I
deceit.
want to make you happy. I want to trick you into feeling what I want you to trick, or not feeling what you're feeling. Just a constant head game.
Oh, it really is.
And then,
And the way that the writer ends that scene, and we don't stay with it. In fact, we end up following up with Villers. But the
Yeah.
way that he ends that scene is like, well, okay, this can now go anywhere. And that's kind of what you want. Like, you want that's a proper mystery. It's like, oh no, what is going to happen next? Because as opposed to what the heck just happened, right? What is going to happen next?
Yeah. That's true.
And Villers, we cut back to the country road and Villers, and what's he done? Well, he's leaning against the driver's truck. He's talking to his guys, and he's found a beach towel in the back of the driver's truck, and he's made a makeshift bandage for his midsection. And we find out that, yep, he killed that driver, and he put him in underneath a tarp in the flatbed. And now he is just trying to figure out where to go next. But he's also talking to someone on the phone who he refers to as Your Excellency, and he says, "Listen, we'll get this all done before sunrise, and you have my word." All this, like, we've now got a ticking clock, which is okay. We got to get it done before sunrise. Whatever this is exactly, it's still a little bit close to the chest of the writer. Hasn't fully committed to it yet, but basically once Villers ends his call with the higher ups within, I guess, their church, he calls up Kerrigan. He's like, "Hey, did you find her? Where is she?" And Kerrigan's like, "She took off in the woods. She's probably gone through the road the other side." And then he basically says, like, when Villar's like, "Well, we have to get her back," and Kerrigan, of course, questions like, "What? So you can shoot her? Are you going to shoot her just like you opened fire on that man?" And Villers tries to justify. It's like, "Well, he shot at you first." It's like, that's not the point. Like, I'm not going to be a party to murder. That is not what I do. And Villers kind of says, "But you will, because you have to help that little girl. This is always going to be a rough road. Sometimes you have to do something bad and ask for forgiveness later because of the consequences and the stakes that are presented before us." And it's not the best argument, but you can feel from Villers that he thinks it is a strong one. And Kerrigan, because he knows more about this situation than we at the audience this time, he kind of reluctantly decides to move forward. But then, and this is what's interesting, as soon as he gets out of the woods, he sees the gas station and the mini mart at the bottom of the hill, and realizes, like, hey, that's why are the lights all off on this 24-hour gas station?
Yeah, right as he sees that the lights go out, and that lets us know. Oh, that's probably her.
Exactly.
Doesn't go out and say it. It just, oh, okay, that's it. That's probably why.
And then we go back inside we do spend some decent time at this gas station, but it kind of has some really interesting aspects to it because, as you said before we got to that cell phone, you could say this could take place in kind of any period within the last 40 years. One in particular comes to when Paula Jean, she changes out of the the modest nightgown that she was wearing into a t-shirt and some sweatpants, and on the t-shirt is a French fry with a caterpillar crawling onto it saying, "Hey buddy, I'm a French fry, get off." And I'm like, yeah. I've seen that t-shirt many times before, for over decades, and it's like it's a classic.
Yeah, and I think the cell phone was only brought in hindsight to give them a communication.
Right.
Could have been radio, but it was more of a plot, I guess, not plot device, but story device.
It was just a function of trying to keep it, I guess, a little bit more modern day.
Yeah, and which is fine. I mean,
yeah.
It didn't stand out. It wasn't overused.
It wasn't, but it was
used in a way you wouldn't use it.
Right. But what I think was kind of funny is that, okay, we got something that anyone between the ages of like 10, or at least anyone who was like a kid in the 90s, as an adult watching this would be like, I know exactly what shirt that is. I've seen that before. Maybe I had one. Maybe a relative had one.
I've seen it.
Yeah, you've seen it. And then what does Paula Jean do? Well, she grabs her old clothes. She puts on some shoes. She bundles up her old clothes, throws some gasoline on it, and just sets it on fire. And of course, Kerrigan can see the light of the fire through the darkened the darkened gas station, and that brings him up to the gas station to challenge Paula Jean. And this part, like, this is where things kind of really escalate to the next part here. And that's with, like, the fact that we get a physical confrontation between Paula Jean and Kerrigan, because even we get this nice little thing with Bethany where she crouches underneath the counter, and we see that the handgun, which she claimed isn't there, is actually ready to go.
Said wasn't there, but is.
It's right there. And Paula Jean's like, well, I'm burning my slave clothes, so to speak. Do you have any contraband you want to burn? And Bethany's like, well, maybe. And that's where she looks at the handgun, and you've got this interesting dynamic where you're wondering, is she going to grab it and shoot Paula Jean to free herself of this situation, or is she gonna still play along out of fear? And of course, Kerrigan and Villers are back on the phone again, and Kerrigan's like, okay, this is my location. This is where I think they are. And Villers has stolen the driver's truck and is en route to rendezvous with them. While Kerrigan manages to get inside the gas station and proceeds to get stabbed a few times with a box cutter.
And when they describe that box cutter going up and down, and the breakable blades, and just
Yeah.
I'm sure anybody who's ever been cut by a box cutter, when you're just doing something, you're like, oh wow, I wish that hadn't happened. That's deeper than I thought. And then for her to just stab him with it, that got to me. And then just added the clicking in and out, clicking
in and out, snapping it off. She's even teasing him because she hasn't seen what Kerrigan's face looks like, but she's like, "Oh my gosh, is that Kerrigan from the moving truck? You are a young stud." And
yeah,
Kerrigan's like, "Just come with me. Let's get you out of here." And of course, Paula Jean's like, "Well, I'm so sorry about all this, Bethany." And then not only does she stab Kerrigan, but she's done another thing that people would be talking about with this movie, is she bites off a piece of his earlobe.
Yeah.
And then kisses him and puts it in his mouth. And it makes him swallow it. And it's just like, holy crap. Like, she's got some power over this guy. And he's trying to appeal to her to save her soul. And then he even starts, like, praying, the Lord's Prayer. And, of course, Paula Jean's, like, all caps, screaming, "Stop!" And so she's like, "Listen, you know what? I'll go with you. Okay, I'll go with you." And the power dynamic shifts quite quickly. And I'm like, well, this is an interesting take, because up until this point, we know that Paula Jean is, like, manipulating people around her, especially with some hallucinations. And there's a weird hallucination that she, I guess, incepts into Bethany. But you get the sense that Kerrigan is doing whatever he can to get Paula Jean to come along with him, knowing that Paula Jean is trying to manipulate him because she's got another plan in mind. And this is where we get this funny thing, whereas Paula Jean's about to leave Bethany, she kind of signals with her fingers and stuff that she's not from the compound, although the body before her is. Where she's from is a little bit deeper below.
Yeah. This scene definitely, and it's well described, the whole gas station scene, because, you're thinking, okay, Kerrigan's a big man. This is a little 20-year-old girl. Physically, he should win, even with a box cutter.
Right.
Who get cut up. But, Kerrigan is also, doesn't want to hurt anyone. But he's also going to, he's not going to stop. He's not going to run away either. But she basically goes terror on him, and enough to really convince Bethany this isn't just a crazy tweaker, or there is something more to this. Something that they hint at that she basically kind of knows. And that you really get a lot of that implied. She's in her head. She's in everyone's head. Maybe even she's more dangerous than you even see and experience. She's only as dangerous she has to be. Because at first when I read it, I was like, oh man, bite off his ear, force him to eat it. I don't even care how much I wanted to save somebody. I wouldn't do anything I wouldn't do, you know?
Right.
And, how is she getting him to do this? Why isn't he,
Why isn't he being
avoiding
like
him?
Villers, very physical and just trying to overpower her? And I think
Yeah,
that goes to the fact that Kerrigan, he he doesn't feel like he's always expressed doubt in that the way that they were handling the situation from the very first page to now has not been the way he would do it.
yes.
And he
Question,
thinks
can
it's
we do it
inhuman.
now? Where are we going to do it?
Yeah.
Why are we going here? Why aren't we doing it there? Yeah. And so his doubts, I mean, it shows that he has doubts,
Hmm.
and we got hints of that, but he's also got doubts of what he's doing that aren't necessarily doubts of faith, but just this
That
doesn't pass the sniff test.
yeah, exactly. Like not
I mean,
everything is
here,
adding up.
yeah, here's somebody who, I mean, now that we know that she's, definitely possessed, it's shown clearly. He as a character has known it all along, and he's even accepted that, and he's accepted he can do something about it. And even when you accept all of those not I guess outrageous to our daily lives,
Hmm.
he's still going, well, this something's not right. How wrong would have something have to be for someone who that's somewhat of a norm to them is questioning, hey, is this the right thing? Are we doing this right?
Well, it also goes back to the big aspect of a possession, which is that the body is of a pure soul, and it's being taken over by this other entity, and whatever damage you do to that body will linger with that person once the demon has been exorcised out. So you want to mitigate that as much as possible.
Yeah, you can only save them. You may have to kill them to save them,
Yeah,
type of
like it
mentality, because saving them is getting them separated.
right. And the thing is, that's where
I'm not
that's where I think Kerrigan is, and the point is like if I harm her and we succeed, that innocent person is going to suffer the harm.
that. Yeah,
and
yeah,
and I'm like that's a fair motivation. It's done all subtly, like it's done through action in the story, told well, that is actually shown. Like you get the sense of it, where his first move when he's approaching Paula Jean is not to attack, is to be defensive because he doesn't want to hurt the real Paula Jean.
right.
And then of course once we get to this point where they've made this deal where Paula Jean's like, okay, you swallow your earlobe, I will follow you to wherever you're going. We'll just have a nice chat, which he does. And then of course Paula Jean's like, well, we can't just go on foot. We need a car. And she turns to Bethany, and that's where I have the question I mentioned earlier, which is like, well, she says, I can't give you my car. I get off in a few hours. I got to get home. Got to pick up my kids. And I'm thinking, like, at this hour of the day, why are you like, where are you picking your kids up from? Like, unless you're talking like really early morning. Again, the context is a little off there, but regardless, Bethany does a very interesting thing where she says, "Oh, you have kids. I don't need to know their names, but if this Father Kerrigan, achieves his goal, I might want to visit your house and see who I can enter that time, who body I can enter that time. Maybe it's you, maybe it's your kid. I don't
Yeah,
know, but if you give me your car, maybe I'll just skip your house."
they'll
And
just forget about this.
yeah, and I'm like, that is some good intimidation right there. Like,
Earned intimidation too. As far as like, oh, okay, I totally understand. You'd do about anything right now because I would.
yeah.
To,
And then what happens? Well, they're Kerrigan and Paula Jean are in the car, and she's like, I wasn't really gonna go and do that to the kids. And then she's like playing with this porcelain Jesus. She's kind of messing around with it offensively. Kerrigan is like, just please stop doing that. She's like, okay, fine. Oh look, it's made in Taiwan. Will straight from the real Holy Land. Like lots of sarcasm by Paula Jean. It makes her a fun character to listen to and watch, even though she's being very blasphemous for those of that faith. But you
yeah,
also really appreciate Kerrigan because he is exemplifying like a moral, patient, honorable man that has this singular goal, which is to save Paula Jean from this demon.
Yeah,
And
he doesn't see her as the demon, but the demon in her.
right. And this is where we get something that's quite interesting where like Paula Jean says, "Oh, she knows everything about the church and all this other stuff and the fact that there's, 195 dioceses." But Karen is like, "No, there's 194." She's like, "Nope, there's 195 and the 195th, they don't want you to know what it is." And
Yeah.
this is a setup that does have a payoff. It's a really good payoff too.
Yeah, as I was reading it, it's like if they don't cover this was just wasted words.
Right. But
And the fact that it did pay it off, it was one of those, it was worth it.
well, I mean, what's really interesting is that even though Kerrigan is trying not to believe anything, he's like, "I'm going in this direction. It's about 3 hours, give or take." Paul Jean is like, "You know what? I'm starving. I'd like to have a meal before I leave this plane of existence." And Kerrigan's like, "Nah, we're not doing that." She's like, "Well, just go to this place right here, this like truck stop." And he, of course, questions her, "The last meal you might ever have on this plane, and you want to go to the truck stop?" It's like, "It's best. It's the best option we have at this moment, given the time you said we have to be going." And he's just like, he's saying, "Okay, fine. You know what? Well, since you're admitting defeat at this point, might as well give you a last meal. It's only fair because that's what in the mortal justice system as it is, we do offer that before a convicted felon is expelled off this plane if that's one of the results in your region." And we get this very another tense moment where you think, "Oh, okay. Well, if they're heading to a diner, is Paula Jean going to do the same thing she did to Bethany to the staff at that diner?" And we don't know right away because we head back to the gas station where Villers has finally shown up. And this one I thought was great because Bethany kind of picks up on exactly who this guy is and that he's no good.
And visually they get someone who can fit this role as you just look at them and don't trust them.
Mm-hmm. Like Kevin Bacon.
Yeah, yeah. But almost like on just a too casual, too normal looking.
Mm-hmm.
But in that when they're doing things or saying things that don't seem right, it's even more creepy or intense or distrusting. Yeah, too nice. No one believes too nice. I guess you can't be too sincere. You're either sincere or you're not. But
Yeah.
yeah, she instantly didn't really care for him
Didn't care for him, didn't trust him, and he quickly gave her the third degree. Like even after, like she's mopping up some of the water after, they put out the fire of the clothes that Paula Jean burnt, and as soon as she's like, "Yep, the fire alarm went off unexpectedly. Tough break about your stock. Blah blah blah. I was looking for my friend." Blue work shirt. Do you happen to see him? She's like, maybe. I think so. Been a busy. I can't remember exactly. And he's like, "Has it been a busy night?" And what was it? A few minutes ago? And she's like, "Maybe." I wasn't paying much attention. And of course, he's like, "Was she alone? Was he alone?" And she's like, "I don't remember." It's like, "You don't remember?" Like he just really is drilling her to the point where he's saying, "I bet you have a videotape of your security footage." She's like, "Yeah, but we don't show that to you." Well, I don't care because I need to see it. And what does he do? He draws his gun and like shoots her point blank in the chest. And
that really caught me off guard.
that it did for me as well because it's like, holy cow, man, you're really, you're just not taking any chances at this point. And she like shoots back. She grabs the gun and shoots back at him, but he manages to get the upper hand. She starts running away. He ends up getting her in the back. And she's just out on the street or like in the area right before the gas pumps, just lying on the ground. And Villers gets inside. He grabs the tape. He doesn't just grab the tape. He grabs the whole machine for it. And he takes it and throws it into the back of the truck. And as he's about to drive off, he sees in the rearview mirror that Bethany's still alive. And then he just puts the car in reverse and off she goes. And it's really like they don't describe what happens. You just hear the bump, bump, bump of it. And that's where Villers is pretty much saying like, "Up, yep, she spit in my face. This is what she deserves." And then we get to the next part where we're back at the diner. You think the truck stop diner. You think Paula Jean is going to do something. She ends up becoming quite charming with the wait staff. Orders an orange milkshake and some pancakes and stuff, and trying to make this a night to remember. And everything's all fine. And this is where we get the payoff to that hallucination earlier on, where Kerrigan, when he was a kid, did something wrong that got him to sort of embrace faith and religion and put him on this new path. And it has to do with like that hallucination where he's apologizing to his mom for this horrible thing that happened. And you're like, okay, we get it. We understand his story. He had a tragedy occur to him. It helped him find God, and now he's a man of the cloth, and he's trying to do the right thing, and that is why he's nowhere near as aggressive to Paula Jean as Villers has been up to this point. He comes from a very different world, so to speak.
Yeah, he's earned the empathy towards others through life experiences, and but he's still subject to the fears of his experiences.
Yeah, like he hasn't, like, he's come to terms with his position in life, but he hasn't fully reconciled the cause that brought him here yet. Like, it still lingers. And they have a pleasant conversation where even with Kerrigan, he kind of asks us like, hey, what is hell like? And then Paula describes something where she's like, it's intangible. And you get used to it, but you don't recognize time. Like, it's a really interesting description, which I encourage anyone, if you get your hands on this screenplay, to go give it a read, because it feels authentic, like not to the Bible itself, but just like, oh yeah, it'd be something so recognizable but intangible that it would just feel like torture all the time, and a torture that you get used to. But when you get out of it, when you claw your way out, you start to forget what it's like, because the real world is just so much more. But as you get closer to returning to what that is, that's where the fear comes back into play. And I'm like, that's pretty cool. That's a cool way to look at it. And then obviously you could suggest like the inverse would be for heaven, right? Like, it's something you remember, it's something you cherish, it's joy, it's all those things. But if you're dragged away from it, all you'd want to do is try and get back there. So I thought that was a good take on it. And then when Paula Jean's like, oh, they've got showers here because it's a truck stop. They have a place. So she's like, I'm going to go have a shower because it's going to be the last one I'll ever have again. And that's when, as soon as she leaves, that's when Viller shows up, having tracked them down. He says, okay, this is have people seen, her? And of course, Kerrigan says, yeah, the waitstaff, the people in this truck stop, they've seen her, but she hasn't behaved in a demonic way. And as a result, these people are fine. They don't know. They haven't connected those dots at this point. And that's where Villers basically says, well, if they do connect the dots, they can't live. And that's where you realize that Villers is the antagonist of this story, like, indisputably. And whatever his plans aren't in tune with what Kerrigan thought he was doing to begin with in the first place.
Yes. And makes all of the evil acts he's done so far, at least not relatable, but like, okay, well, I understand why. That's what you are as a character. That's your motivations.
Oh, exactly. And the other part too is like, he says, this is where we get a little bit of Villers talking about his past and how he's a dark man, but his soul is, and his entire faith and everything of his body is in service of God. And sometimes God needs a man that can do horrible things in his name to rescue or save the world from the evil that is waging war against the good. And I'm thinking this is some good word salad to justify doing horrific acts for an ideology or any type of belief that teaches the opposite. And I thought, oh, this is great, because even though this is framed in the point of religion, you could apply that perspective to anything, to a regular ideology, to an academia, to policing, to firefighting, to investigate, like any type of thing where someone is so obsessed with one subject that they're willing to actually betray what its core values are in order to what they think is to preserve that subject, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm like, see, that's a good dynamic of a story.
The religion's a good vehicle for it, but everybody with any morality base is going, this is what I expect.
Yeah.
Family, this is what I expect with my coworkers. This is what I expect with my interactions with everyone in life. You still have that moral, but telling it from the perspective of a church is
Of a church. It has a little bit more impact for hyperbole, but
yeah,
it doesn't divorce the overall allegory of it, which is that, like, even if it was like a corporate institution, well, we're going to exploit all these customers so that we can actually make sure that we're saving them in the long run. And you're hedging a bet, but it's still a bet.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
And
try doing bad to help keep the good that is done in the world.
Oh, exactly.
It isn't seen as a wash. It's seen as a necessary evil.
Yes, the necessary evil, which, I mean, this works in lots of stories. In fact, it's exemplified in our history as well. But one of the things that we like about certain fantasy stories is that you really want your heroes to be the ones that don't understand that the necessary evil is really just a facade. It's ethereal. It's fake. It's a lie, because you're only justifying that the evil itself was necessary in the first place, and that even though you're claiming to be fighting on the side of good, you're not so good as to reject that evil, because you see value in it. And if you can see value in it, then your good is not as pure as you are, expressing yourself as. Which is one of the things I liked about the classic Star Wars trilogy is, the rebels are by and large very good. They're not going to do the horrible things that the Empire is doing in order to win their war.
Right.
And that's there's some value to that there. And if we as a species, which is almost impossible to do, but if we as a species could live up to that standards and fulfill that standards, we would all be a lot better for it. So we think. We don't know for sure. We've never really tried it. The world's too complicated. People are too complicated. Yeah. But in the fantasy world of fiction, especially in this case here, where Kerrigan, I mean, he's literally the guy that's saying, no, I'm not going to do this. And Villers is saying, it doesn't matter. You're already a part of it. We have to do this. This is the responsibility with which we took. You don't have to like it, but you have to know that it's going to achieve this goal that we're looking for. And this is where Villers says there's an abandoned church, which this is your 195 diocese here. It's like, this is where you're going. It's a couple hours here. These are the directions. You're going to take her there. We're going to do what we have to do. And what we find out is, and this is kind of, oh man, I'm thinking to myself, is like, I really want to share with the audience what happens kind of next, but we're getting right up to a spoiler territory, because one of the things that this script does well is that they spend a good, I mean, even though I think the first act is a little rocky, once we get into the idea of, oh, okay, there's this dynamic here, there's this possession of Paula Jean, they then throw in another element that's really fascinating. And I kind of want to talk a little bit around that with you, Jake, because when they brought in that extra element, what was going through your mind at that point?
Are you referring to?
I'm referring to something that's a little
in the spoiler area, or in the part of the story with the characters.
I think it technically gets revealed a little bit before the spoiler cutoff that we discussed before the show, but it's essentially like it's one of the aspects that triggers the coming of Christ again, the second coming of Christ.
Oh yeah. So I wasn't sure if that was.
No, that's okay, man. Like again, we're in this weird position.
We all kind of know the story, but we also know, what we all or what's expected, but we also, I don't know what part of the story is. So yeah, I mean, are you talking about his Villers and Kerrigan talking to his motivations at the diner, or and what he has to promise, or
It's part of what he has to promise, but it also goes up to the next part, which is that they're not planning to kill Paula Jean
oh right
because they
with
need her.
and you're not and that's not spoiler. You don't want to use that. Okay.
Yeah, I don't really want to go too close to that. We definitely know it's not a spoiler that they're not going to try to kill her. They're trying to save her, but they're
They'll
trying to
try and
save
save
her
it.
because there's
Use
something else that they need from her.
yes.
And
It's almost like embracing the evil to allow the evil to happen so that well because we know after the evil comes the good, so
exactly.
let's help the evil, let's help the bad guys here so that we can get to the end, and I'll do whatever I have to make the
To make that happen, because
make that
that
happen.
end is what is foretold, right? And
Yeah.
in my personal life, I have met people in the Catholic Church and in some Protestant churches and other areas that are very gung ho for that end. I have of the mind is like, well, we all pass away eventually. Why do you want to rush it? It's just uh,
Do you want to experience that good moment? The my personal thoughts and beliefs on that are okay. It is described as not pleasant,
mhm.
and the only hope that a person is given, if you believe in the revelations and stuff like that, is after this happens, we get the good period. So, um, but again, who wants to experience that horrific part? Because when you die, your life's over anyway. So why make it any worse
Before
while
then,
you're
yeah.
alive?
It's
But I understand that it's kind of like that anticipation of dread. You're
yeah.
like, well, we're gonna sit here and wait and wait and wait and wait, and the world's as evil as it is right now. I'm imagining that this is as evil as it'll get, and this is the hard times that I'll get. So
Mhm.
let's just bring it on so we can get to that next chapter and stop the anticipation.
Right. And listen, I get that. Like, we've seen it on social media. You see something absurd in the news, you're like, when was that meteor gonna hit us? It just it's what it
Yep.
is. Me on the other side of, like, because I've explored faith. I'm definitely no expert in it, but I'm always of the mind where I always ponder, if you try to rush towards that ending so soon, um, you kind of rob all of eternity of the future souls that would be developed, because I don't really know for certain if I buy into the idea that every soul that ever was to exist has existed and it's just kind of being cycled through humanity. I'm more of the mind, like, I think it's when a couple gets together, they're married, they love each other, they create a life. That's also the creation of another soul, right? And that's what is contributing to and would go towards a heaven, um, at the end. And if you were to end humanity prematurely, you have now ended any more souls coming into heaven, and heaven is supposed to be infinite, so that you really can't have an overpopulation there. So why would you
Exactly.
want to rush that? Would you want to just try to make it as bountiful as possible? Um, I mean, that's just the question that I always have hanging, and it's a deep philosophical question and discussion to have with people who are far more versed in that than I am. But it's just something I always like, just even from a story perspective or just a logic perspective. It's like, I mean, the act of creation, that, and it has this ripple effect, this domino effect, to be both beneficial with hard times. Wouldn't that be something you'd figure characters like this in the script, like Kerrigan and Villers, wouldn't you think that they'd want to preserve that, um, as long, as opposed to just rushing to the end and be like, okay, after that, there's no more, you know? And when there's no more, what what else is there? It's like, okay, you've met every soul that ever existed in the afterlife, and you know them all intimately well, and they're all like family, and then you would have nothing change, nothing different. You'd almost be basically setting yourself up for madness at that point, even if it was in the afterlife, because there's nothing left to experience.
Yeah,
um
I mean, if you have eternity, but you don't have an infinite supply of
Curiosity
new
is
ones,
supposed to, yeah.
curiosity, growth, family, well, then eternity turns into
Purgatory.
purgatory.
Yeah. And
Jinx.
so
We
it,
said it in time.
exactly. Yeah. It's like it's like, oh, it's blissful. It's great. And then okay, it's like
Yeah.
when you've read every book in the library. Well, now what? Is anyone writing any new books? Not this week. Okay, so do I want to reread another book? It's just
Are we
like
starting over? Are you sure I can't make a new one?
exactly right. So because that's my counter argument to the people that say like the end is nigh, we must achieve this goal, we must get this done, we must end it all. It's like I don't think that's useful to anyone. I think seeing how far we can go is an adventure on its own.
Right.
And
Growth
Villers
and
is like, nope, we don't believe in that. Not our little pocket of people over here.
yes. And you see that clear disconnect. Oh, okay, we believe two different things.
Right. Oh,
But
absolutely. Like they both believe two different things, and yet they both draw from the same source of knowledge to justify their actions. But we, as the audience, objectively able to say, well, Kerrigan's clearly in the right here because he's not trying to achieve his goals at the expense of his own morality and soul, where Villers has already given up on that.
yet they still need each other to accomplish their task.
Right. And it's a
Which,
not an easy solution, which makes even more
yeah,
entertaining.
yeah, yes, it does. And I liked the dynamic of where one of the things she had promised was promise me I'll go with you alone and not Villers.
Right. And he
And
does.
Villers,
He,
I'll take it from here.
yeah, pretty much. Well, like Villers just interjects and says he's taking it from here, and Kerrigan's like, well, no, this is what
I
I
promised.
promised, and
And and
he,
and I could almost see Villers' perspective of going, you promised a demon. You
right.
can break that promise.
You can break a promise with the demon, right?
But you're trying to, in a way, help the demon. So maybe
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 you're
I
compromised
don't
by
want
the
to help
demon,
you. I
and
don't I
yeah,
don't I don't owe you anything. The only thing I want to do is help her, which is separate her.
right. So I mean, so we've talked almost 90 minutes on this story. There's a lot to it. For something that takes place in a very short time,
Yeah.
very small characters. It's got some dense moments to it that are like the plot is very simple. It's we got to get Paula Jean to this location, exorcise the demon out of her. Extra aspects of it as well, which we won't spoil. Very straightforward, but each scene, each main point where they stop, like whether it's on the road with the driver who's about to find out what they're doing, whether it's in the gas station, and you got Bethany being kind of manipulated and puppeteered, so to speak. Then it's at the diner where you think, oh, are they going to do the gas station thing again with more players on the board? They all have like really powerful moments to it, and it really kind of gets inside your head, and it makes you ponder certain things about what each perspective is saying from the demon's perspective about how valuable life is and how valuable it is to be mortal and why it's better than hell, to Kerrigan and dealing with his own faith and his own doubts, but also trying to do good and save the people that have fallen to darkness, to Villers, who has decided to embrace the darkness because he feels he can do something to benefit the light as a result. He's willing to sacrifice and be punished for these actions he's taking because he's of the mind that those ends justify the means. And
Yeah.
it's all well balanced. I have to, tip my hat to this writer. I was quite, aside from this obvious spelling mistakes, which you can forgive a little bit of that because there are few and far between. Um, it's a well written script. Do you have any final thoughts, Jake, before we tally it up at the end?
Yeah. I think it was very easy to read, but the only reason you would stop and slow down was more to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there was almost like I could picture a scale. As one character was drifting this direction, another character was balancing it out. So if one was leaning towards evil, someone you expected was evil was also showing, hey, well, you know what? This isn't perfect, and maybe all we want is just what you have.
Right.
And so I can see the goodness, and it's totally not connected to another character that, is embracing an evil act. They aren't playing off of each other, but we're experiencing it together, and the script and the show would be showing that, and that is, I think, really really done well, because you don't get overloaded with the, well, everything's hopeless, you know or everything is optimistic or anything like that. You've got this continual swirling of the balance of good and evil. What would you do? What oh, maybe I wouldn't do that, but I understand why you're doing it.
Right.
Or I at least go, I understand the way I it's sincere that you believe that. So
I think it leans into the fact that, as opposed to conflating it with a sympathetic villain, it's the villain where you understand their motives and you still disagree with them.
yes.
And
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 and that's always been a hard thing for me to accept before I watch a movie, but it is something that I go, oh, okay.
mhm.
That's why I'm okay with enjoying this movie that I may not have, I may have had predetermined, this isn't for me because I don't want to feel this way, or I don't want to think this way, or I'm, this just
Yeah,
doesn't match my morality and my mindset.
but because you understand what the villain's doing, it actually further
Yeah.
reinforces why you believe and behave the way you do because you recognize how that's wrong. Like that's what I
Yeah.
think a great villain is supposed to do. It's supposed to say, "Listen, I know how to justify it." And then you have to be like, "Well, I can see your argument and I can see its strengths and I can see its weaknesses, but it's still wrong."
Yeah.
And the fact that I can recognize that and you can't, that does make you evil. And
Yeah.
that, I mean, that's the cool part. And then in a story like this, ideally you'd be like, well, Kerrigan's job is not just to kind of rescue Paula Jean, but also can he rescue Villers as well? And
Yes.
that there's that dynamic. So I mean, I it shouldn't be a surprise to any of the listeners today. I again, as I mentioned earlier, I'm pretty glad that we didn't cover this for Christmas because this because the context of it itself is a little it's definitely not a Christmas type movie, but it does cross over with some of the themes of it.
Yeah.
But I think it's a little bit more appropriate for this Thanksgiving Day one because it's not Thanksgiving related. It's just it's an interesting thriller, psychological thriller. It harkens back to the '70s ones, as I mentioned. The Exorcist is a good example. There's some others there I won't say because that might spoil the ending. But
Hmm.
I don't think it's going to be a surprise to the audience. But we're just going to make it official, anyways. Jake, for Blasphemous, would you give it a green light or a pass?
I would give it a green light.
I would
With
as
a
well.
with the caveat is, unless it really hooked me with good actors and characters, I could also see myself not seeing it, but still acknowledging it's a really great script,
Yeah,
but only more on personal, you know, that trailer had hooked me. But yeah, no, absolutely. Green light.
yeah, I would as well. I mean, it's well written. It's a simple story. It does what good stories do, which is it doesn't tell you how to think, but it does raise questions that get you thinking, which I liked.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably the best way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, because
Tell you
that's
what to think. It shows, it gives you opportunities to think.
yeah, and you're they're not thoughts that are like it guides you in a direction. It's like, hey, here's a subject matter. Here's what I'm making a point of, and you're like, okay, well that's an interesting point. I don't agree with it, but I see how you came to that, and it just allows you can circle around it a couple of times and be like, oh, okay, I get where you're coming from,
Yeah.
and I can see what you're trying to do, and it's like, okay, now we're in like this battle of wits territory. And that's also really fun and engaging for an audience because now they're like, okay, well, I know I can't trust you, and I know you're going to have like a silver tongue of arguments to try and make me trust you, but it's not going to work. But I appreciate the effort, right? And that's the type of dynamic I think is good. It's kind of like Darth Vader with the dark side. You don't know how powerful it is. We could do this, we could do that, we could rule the galaxy, and we could rule it without being evil, and completely ignoring the fact, well, you're still claiming to be ruling the galaxy, so that when there's a single ruler, there's not much freedom below, you know,
Yeah.
and so
And if being evil and committing evil acts sets you up to the point where now I can no longer be evil, it's still not worth it.
exactly.
It
Um,
doesn't justify.
and that's part of the Villar's aspect of his story, which um, I think is great, and I think it'd be a juicy role for any actor in that age range to do it. So okay,
Yeah,
we got another double green light, which is fantastic. This far into the show.
I
Um,
would be surprised if this did not get made into a movie because, um, everybody likes the psychological thrillers, but this isn't something that was like people are going to go, well, I'm not going to do it. They're not worried about offending people.
mhm,
Um, and it's a nice tight script and relatively few locations get the right star behind it.
mhm.
I, I would be surprised if this one didn't, but maybe it's the sheer number of scripts that when you have enough to choose from, it only has to be the right one caught your eye.
Oh, exactly. And I think that the fact that came in 49th on the blacklist is, I think that's not as in good service to the script itself. I think it at least should be in the top 20. At least what
Yeah.
we've read so far, because it does a lot of the right things. It has a very high concept. It has a decent twist. Um, I really enjoyed the ending.
Uh-huh.
It's it it's a throwback to the style of like the 70s horror thrillers. It's not a gore fest, which is already a win on my thing, because I think any excessive gore is kind of just gratuitous and pointless.
Yeah.
It has an aspect to debate about it. It's very inoffensive too. Like it's not deliberately, it's not trying to be a commentary on anything in particular. Even though it is couched around the idea of religion, it has far more broader aspects to it. So I hope this actually gets made. It'd be great if it did. I think it'd
Yeah.
be I think it would do well for as a modest budget film,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna cross my fingers. Hopefully, someone smart out there will invest in it and make this a reality, because
And
th-
and it's got enough going for it visually that it it provokes enough thought that anybody with any kind of visual sense would be able to make the most out of every scene.
oh,
Great
absolutely.
actors would be able to bring out so much that I mean you'd have a hard time not making a successful movie. It's all there. You don't have to change anything.
No, I couldn't find anything wrong with the structure of the story or the character motivations. Um, this is the type of script where it's really down to the production to fail to live up to what's on the page.
Yeah.
Like if it's shot boring, if the acting is wooden or not convincing enough, like those are the only things that would make this intolerable to watch. But what's on the page, I'm like this. I mean, even with the little shakiness at the first act, because there's so much mystery going on, and it's being peppered around for build up. Once you hit that second act and you know what the pieces on the chessboard are where they're staged and where they're headed, I was hooked. I'm like, I'm in. It took me a minute longer than I wanted to get there, but it pays off, and
Definitely was worth it.
I think that this is definitely something that people should read, and the industry should get behind, whether it's a studio or a smaller indie studio to do it. This would be a great little Halloween or horror themed themed film.
Yeah, and and I was, my caveat of whether I would see it or not was based upon if I see a movie like this, any kind of horror tension, I have to watch in the theater. I like to watch it in the theater because that's where it's designed for.
Hmm.
But also, I can go out to eat afterward, go home, and not worry about it. But if I watch a movie at home, first of all, I get distracted. It doesn't have the element in the light and the setting
Hmm.
that needs to be if I can pause it and say, okay, I'm a little shook up and I want to go in the other room, or that jump scare got me, so I'm going to pause it. That's yeah. I mean, I'm a very strong component of all movies seen in the theater. Should
Mhm.
be made with that in mind, but I understand some go straight to home. I would never do. I don't like horror going to home because you take away the element the minute you pause it,
Yeah, you
and
give yourself
should
permission to kind of reset. Where in the theater you don't have that benefit. Yeah.
yeah, and hearing other people
Oh,
jump and scream, that's fun too.
absolutely. And one of the things I appreciate about this script is that um, it doesn't have any jump scares other than I guess
Oh
when they
yeah,
hit the bowl, and that's
yeah,
that's a different type of jump scare as opposed to like Michael Myers coming out from behind with a knife. Uh, but yeah, like this. I mean, what I am grateful about this is that is definitely a one and done script. Um,
oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
uh,
Especially with the ending, I feel like anything you tried to do beyond it would well, just make another movie.
yeah, it would be or it wouldn't it'd just be kind of irrelevant at that point. I think this is
Yeah.
this is definitely a good one and done for that. So, dude, I think that's about all we can really talk without getting into spoilers. So, I want to thank you again for doing the recording with me tonight and having the show ready, sir. Any last things you want to say before we call it?
Yeah, I have a prediction between now and Thanksgiving, aliens are going to land. Everything's all. So I called it right here, right now. The world will be upside down and on its face. I'm just kidding. The world's all caught up in everything. And every day is the new drama. So I'm
It,
being
it,
sarcastic.
exactly, but that's why we have this fiction to entertain us and allow us
Yeah.
to sort of build up build up some thicker skin on the craziness of our real world.
Yeah. My real prediction is everybody will have eaten some good food, visited with family, and had a great time.
Mine too, sir. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jake.
Anytime.
I want to wish all of you out there listening have a wonderful weekend, a wonderful Thanksgiving, and never forget, guys, when it comes to great story, it all starts with the script.